Hey guys, it's Belle, and in this video we are going to be reading through and translating the third and final part of the Old High German poem Muspilli, which treats the matter of the soul's fate after death. So if you want to, as usual, have a go at pausing the video and writing out your own translation before you listen to what I say about it, feel free to do so. Otherwise, let's get on with it, and forgive me as usual if my old High German pronunciation is not so good. So, Pidiu ist demo mane so gut, den ze demo machale quimit, dat ze rachno welicha recht war teile, den nie darf sorgen, den ze der swon quimit, ni weet der venago man, welichan wartil habet, den met den miaton marit dat rechter. Dat der dioval daar begetarnet stentit. Der hapet in rohu rachno welicha, dat der man entisid upiles gefrumita, dat et alas gesaget, den te der luswon quimit. Ni skalta sid manon nochin, miatunin fachan, så dat himmeliska horn gehlutet werdet, en die zich der anna den sindar hevet, der da soanan skal, den hevet sich mit immo herre meister. Dat ist allat so palt, dat immo nioman geparan nimak. Okay, so what does all of this mean? So, Pitiu ist demo mane so gut. Therefore, it is so good for that man. When he comes to that court tribunal, is what machal means. Dat rachno welicha rechto arteile. That he should account welicha rachno, each of the reckonings, rechto, by right or correctly, accurately, basically. Den ni darfer sorgen. So then he does not need to sorrow or to lament. Den den quimit. When he comes to the Son, because of course it's Jesus who is going to be judging the living and the dead. Ni weet der venago man, velechan wardil habet. So the wicked, basically, this word venago is related to wenachs in Gothic. So the wicked or wretched man does not know wilichan wartel, which watcher havet he has. Den met den miaton marit dats rechter, when he mars that which is right with miaton. Now miat is sort of like pleasure or rewards. So basically when a man contravenes natural law almost with that which is pleasurable, he doesn't know which of the watchmen he'll have, because if you may remember from part 1 of this poem, it talks about a man being carried away either by angels or by demons, so that's what this is referring to. So, dat der tioval dar pigetarnet stentit, that the devil will stand there in the shadows. So basically, it's saying that when a man is contravening that which is right with pleasures, he isn't aware that the devil is standing there in a hiding place, ketarnet. Der hapet in rovu rachano welicha. He has in silence each of the reckonings. That's der man entisid upilis gefrumita, that the man previously and afterwards enacted of evil. So the devil basically has a score of all the good and bad things, of all the evil things that the man has done. Dat it's alles gesaget, that he, meaning the devil, will say everything. Den te demo quimit, when the man comes to the Son. So this poem, Muspilli, is envisioning a grand Judgment Day scene where Christ is sat on the throne, and the devil is sort of sat in a hiding place in this court, and when a sinner comes before the throne, the devil, cries out from the shadows and reads out this long list of sins that the man has committed while he was alive. Ni skolta sid mano nochin miotun in fachan. So thereafter, no man should be captured by rewards, be seduced almost by rewards. So that's himmeliska horn geklutet with it. As soon as the heavenly horn is blown, geklutet with it. And he sich der anna den sind arhevet. And he heaves himself onto that journey. And you might remember that this exact same phrase of heaving oneself onto the path was used in part 1 to refer to the soul departing the body after death. Der dare swanan skull, who shall render judgment there. So, of course, this person who is moving themselves onto the journey is referring to Jesus. Den hevet sich mit imo herio meister. Then the greatest of warbands moves with him. That's it's alat so pal. That is also courageous. That's or maybe so bold, so brazen. That's imo nyoman kipagan nimak. That nobody can overpower them, and that's referring to the horde of angels. Denna verit cederlu machal steti. Deru dar markot ist. Dar virdet diu suona, diaman dario sagta. Denne varand engela uppardior marcha, wechant theota wisant zedinge. Denne skal manuilich, fona deru moltu arstein, losan sich der level watson. Skal imo avar sin lip bequeman, dat sin recht alats kilachun muazi, and imo after sinen tatin teilet werde. Denne der gesitzet, der da sonen skal, en die teilen skal, toten en die quechen. Denne stet dar pi engelo mengi, water gomeno, gard est so Michel. Okay, so denne vedet to der machalsteti means then he comes to the sort of tribunal place, basically. Derudar kimarkot ist, in which place it is marked out. Dar virdet du swana, there the judgment will come to pass. Diaman dar yosagata, that which one has already said there. Denna varant engela uppar dio marcha. Then angels will traverse over the border, the march, the boundary. And this is maybe, presumably, the boundary between heaven and earth. Wechant theora, the people will, or the tribes even, will rise up or will awake. Wisant zedinge, they will lead the way towards the thing, and this is a thing with a capital TH. This is that like ancient Germanic political meeting, which in Old Norse is referred to as literally thing, and I believe also in Old English sources. Denne skal manogilich von der moltu arstein. Then every man shall rise up from the soil. Losan sich der level vatson. And this is repeating the skal gilich mano from the previous clause. So each man shall loose himself out of the burdens der level of the graves. Skal imo avar sin lip pequeman. So, nonetheless, his body shall come to him. Dat sin recht alats kinlachen motzi, so that he might, reckon all of his right. And I think in this case it's like that which he is entitled to. So there's a couple of different meanings. One of them is that, medieval Christians at this time believed in the resurrection of the body. They believed that one would be restored to a fully healthy body at the age of 33. And it was this body which would face the final judgment. So, separation of body and soul at death is a sort of obscenity which Christ redeems through his sacrifice. And then at Judgment Day itself, the question of whether that sort of soul body combination will be given eternal life in heaven or will be damned in hell is decided by Christ based on the actions that the person did during life, as it says here. And he immer after synen tatin artheilet verde, and it will be dealt out to him according to his deeds. Denna der gesittet, then that man sits, or sits down, der da swanan skull and the artheilan skull, totten and quechen, who will render judgment there and will separate the dead and the living. So obviously both the dead and the living have been given back their bodies in this context, and Christ is going to be judging which of those bodies will live and which will die. Den estet dar umpi angelo menegi. Then a multitude of angels stand around there. Quattro gubano, a multitude of good humans. Garth est so michel. The enclosure is so great, referring presumably to the enclosure of heaven. Darda quimit sed der rectungu, so vilo, dia dar ar resti arstent. So dar mano noch in wicht bemittern nimak. Dar skal den hand sprechen, hoapet sagen. Allerl lido wellik, unti in den lutzigun vinger, wat unter dessen mannen mordes gefrummeta. Daar nist så listig man, der daar jovikt liugan megi, dat getarnan megi tato geheina. Nit al vara dem hunniga gekuntet verde, utsan its mit allum massenu, friviegi enti mit fastun dio virina kepoatsti. Denne der paltet der gepoatsit hafet. Virdet denne furike tragan dat frono kruci, daar der heligo Christ anna hangan vart. Denne auget dio nassun, dio in der menneski, dio durch desse man kunnes mina. And then the fragment of Muspilli cuts out. So what does this mean? Daar the quinit zet deru richtungu. Then he comes to the judgment, essentially. And you might notice this, the word richt is there in richtungu to refer to sort of the allocation of that which is right. So vilu, so much or so many people come to the judgment. Dia dar ar resi arstent, those ones who rise up from the rest. So dar madon nochin wicht pimitan himak. So not one of the men in that place, wicht pimitan himak, cannot avoid anything, or they cannot conceal anything. Daar skal denne hand sprechen. There the hand shall speak. Huopet sagen, the head shall say. Aller lido relic unsi in den lutzigun finger. Each of the person's limbs, all the way to the little finger. Wat unter dessen mannen mortis gefrummeta. What of evil, basically, mortis, or even of crime or of murder, unter dessen mannen, among these men, gefrummeta. So what this is saying is that it's quite an interesting philosophical implication they have here, that the literal body keeps a theological score of the sins that one has done, and one's body after death will be able to speak and give an account of the sins that one has committed, even if one is unwilling to say it themselves. And this will presumably maybe be among the people gathered, so one's body among the bodies of various other resurrected people will give account of what sins they have committed on earth. Daar nist so listig man. Then there, in that place, there is no man so clever. Der daar jowicht liugan megi, that he might be able to lie about anything in that place. Dat ketarnan megi tato de chena. that he may conceal any of his deeds. Nits al vara demo kuninga kichunted verde, that it would not all be announced for the kuninga before the king. Utsan its mit alla musanu frivieki, unless he sort of waves it away or manages it with almsgiving. That this is a sort of loan word from the Latin elemenosia. So this is an interesting. It's interesting that they bring it in as a loan word. So it could be that they're talking about almsgiving to the church, and that's why the word is used, rather than just giving money in general to the poor. Or it's quite possible that there simply was no common Old High German equivalent among the pagans of almsgiving and charity, and therefore they didn't have a concept, a native concept that could so easily fit into the Christian concept of almsgiving, so they had to use the Latin loanword here. So unless he manages his sins with almsgiving, endi mit fastun dio virna kepuatsi, and he makes amends for these sins with fasting. Now, just a very quick note, if you have watched my videos on, I believe it's a curious old High German charm, then you might have noticed that in there we have the phrase "das dir zebote," may this serve as a remedy for you. And this verb "kepuatsti" is actually the same concept. It's like serving as a remedy. And so it's really interesting here that almsgiving and fasting are framed here as almost medicinally beneficial for the body and soul as a single unit, and they're using the same language as is used in medicinal healing charms, which are specifically for healing the body, in the case of the charm that I covered in that video for stemming blood flow, or blood loss, I should say. So this is just going to underscore one of the central thematic takeaways we can have from this, that the Germanic poem Muspilli is really emphasizing the unity of body and soul within Christian thought. Denne der paltet der kaputzit habet. Then he becomes bold and mighty, he who has like redeemed this, or he who has remedied his sins. And notice also that in the first bit of this third part that we were doing here, it says in line 76, that is alles so pal, that's immer niemand gepagan nimak. So the host of angels is so pal, courageous, that nobody may fight against it. So here at the end it's saying he becomes pal, he becomes emboldened and becomes strong. So this is drawing a direct connection between Christian almsgiving and military, I guess, strength and power, maybe to appeal to some of that warrior culture that existed in Germany during the, I believe, 10th century when this poem, or maybe 9th century when this poem was written down. Because, of course, the Christian virtues of pacifism and being meek and humble, etc., they don't necessarily merge too well with a warrior culture where people were in pagan times expected to gain honor and fame through violence and earthly deeds. So this poem is, I guess, consoling that warrior interest, that warrior instinct in the culture by saying, actually, by even though these actions, like giving alms to the poor and by fasting, they may not look like they're bold, heroic warrior deeds, but actually they toughen you up like a warrior. They make you bold and firm such that nobody would dare to fight you. And so they're almost equivalent of gaining fame through fighting. So it's like trying to entice these people into Christian values. And then Verit denne wurde getragen dat frono cruci. So then that regal cross, dat frono cruci, is dragged forward. Daar der Heilige Christ Anna arhangen war. There the Holy Christ was hung upon. And so with this arhangen, some YouTubers like Scott Shell would probably argue that this line is a sort of Odinic reference, and it maybe refers to, in a veiled way, to Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, and rather than saying, for instance, that Christ was nailed to a cross, and that's a reasonable thing to say. It's not completely unreasonable. I just think that we would need to look for more Odinic allusions within this poem, like more symbolism of Christ being fused with Odin in Muspilli, and I don't think we see that many of them here. We do see a good few in the Heliand, and I could conceive that the Heliand as a poem is trying to thread the line between pagan imagery and Christian imagery, and to merge those two when talking about Christ. But I don't think this hanging on the cross means too much, because it's actually possible for Christ to have been both hung from a cross and nailed to the cross. We know for a fact that in the Bible that he is nailed to the cross, but I think a lot of archaeologists who have been recreating crucifixion, not like literally, but who have been studying hypothetically what it would do to a body to be crucified, they pointed out that nails sort of drilled into a crucified person's hands and feet wouldn't actually be sufficient to support their weight on the cross, and so it would essentially rip through the flesh and they would fall from the cross. So they would almost certainly have to have ropes attached to their wrists and stuff, which would keep them hanging on the cross even after the flesh had been ripped through. So I think it's quite plausible that this is what that's a reference to Christ hanging from those ropes on the cross. And that's also an entirely plausible interpretation of the Heliand scene of Christ on the cross as well. And I should do a video about that at some point. But anyway, so the point is that what they're saying here is once the judgment is rendered, the regal cross is carried out on which Christ was hung. And then the last sentence, denna auget dio masun. So then it reveals the scars, dio in der meniski, that he among mankind, dio durch dessen mankones minna. The scars which he, through mankind's sins, and then the last word was probably like gained or acquired, but we don't actually know what that was because the fragment cuts out. And there we go. That is the end of it. That was our reading of the 9th century Old High German poem Muspilli. Sorry that the third part came out so much later than the first two parts. If you want me to teach you, I won't teach you Old High German because I'm not too good at it yet, but Gothic or Latin or Old English, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which we linked in the description of this video, where I offer tuition at lower than market rates, and shout out to my 3 patrons that I currently have. You make these videos more feasible for me. You can also join my Discord server if you want some questions answered or help with ancient languages, where I tend to post these glosses as pictures before I turn them into videos, so you can get early access there. Now we also have actually separate channels for the different medieval languages that I discuss on my channel, so you can have specified help and community to talk about them with other people. And until next time, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye everyone.